This way we kind of has a feeling of who we are. One change for next month's meeting is folks had asked for an afternoon meeting so we can have a luncheon. So this room is only open December 15th. So next month's meeting is December 15th from 12:30 to 2:30 Sodexo. If you haven't been at the luncheons, they do it wonderfully. They do a hot lunch, they do a carving station, they do hot dishes. So that will be our holiday get-together, and I guess our goodbye to Mark and our hello, what's her name?
Jolie Bautista.
And our hello to Jolie Bautista at that meeting.
What day here, the 16th?
15th.
15th,
Tuesday the 15th. So probably the happy hour somewhere to follow. We'll do the speaker first, yeah?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We'll do Brett first.
Okay. We will.
I get it.
DeNovi, correct? This is Brett DeNovi. Brett came to my attention through Mark, and our superintendent also, I think, heard him speak and thought the presentation was wonderful. As you know, between the LRA settlement agreement and all the move towards keeping children in more inclusive settings, Brett's work has been, and what he's going to be focusing on today, are 6 ways to keep students in LRA using ABA. And I can tell you here, and I'm sure other districts are, our BCBA has been like full force in general ed classrooms with FBAs and recommendations and plans to keep students prior to classification and then to support them as they go along the process.
So, welcome, and I'm excited to be able to get in front of a group of colleagues that I think feel my pain, because each one of you, most of you, you're special ed directors and directors of people ed services and some child study team members, right? From what I heard. Okay, this is perfect, because when I say I think you feel my pain, I think it's because, let me just ask by a show of hands, how often are you aware that parents hire independent evaluators that are like hired guns? They pay them a lot of money and they come in just to find problems, by show of hands. Okay. All right. Is there anyone who doesn't see that? Okay. Well, 12 years ago, I used to be one of those hired guns. So what I'm going to do today is let you know over 26 years, for the past 26 years, well, by trade, I'm a board certified behavior analyst. Been working in education programs for 26 years. I started in really rigorous settings. There's something down in South Jersey in Bancroft called the Lindens. Have you ever heard of it? It's like ridiculously restrictive lockdown program where you can control every experimental variable for a kid's behavior. Not the real world. It's kind of silly because when they're discharged, it's not appropriate, usually the program. I guess you've probably heard of it, right? Your BCA. Yeah. So, to everything from the less restrictive setting, which I love, which is the public school, working with kids in inclusive settings, and being able to have them inculcate into the natural population, kids with developmental disabilities and other behavioral issues. So, what I wanted to talk to you about today is, given the idea that these independent evaluators come in, and I like to say they can draw a target around an arrow. Do you know what I mean? You can find a problem if you look hard enough, no matter how stellar, no matter how best practice your school program is. I mean, put it this way, I've even seen it. Right now we work, our consulting group works in about 62 school districts throughout New Jersey, Delaware, and New York, okay? And regularly it comes to my attention about how an independent evaluator came in and looked at something. We may have been consulting as BCBAs in a district, and as little as taking one data point from a graph and matching it up to the raw data sheet, which we don't like to give out, but where they might collect the frequency of behaviors. You might feel my pain. And then an independent evaluator may come in and find one data point that doesn't match up, therefore say that the whole program is garbage, and no matter how great your instructional design is, no matter how great your progress for your student, your learner is, the parent side attorney uses that and says, okay, now I want a $200,000 program out of district because of this one data point. And somehow administrative law judges buy into some of these things, and they find little things to pick at the program. Now, that's just one anomaly. It always doesn't always happen that way. But what I want to talk to you about today is 6 ways of avoiding these kinds of things, and 6 strategies to keep kids in a less restrictive setting. Because to tell you a personal situation for me, 12 years ago, when I was in a very restrictive setting, working with severe behaviors and in educational programs, it became a mission to me to want to work in public schools. So that's what I've been doing the last 12 years, and keeping kids in settings where they can make friends, where they can integrate into the natural inclusion setting, and be part of the community. And it's very personal to me because I remember 12 years ago when I worked for this one residential program in school, that was the lockdown unit. There was a kid that was in physical restraint, actually in a mechanical restraint, which is, there's very few of those approved in New Jersey. It required human rights consent, parent consent, all these unusual consents, behavior management review. The student was overweight. He was in mechanical restraint. They used these different Velcro things to keep his arms in by his side. Then this program invented this thing. It seems so inappropriate. They invented this mat that had 3 flaps that went over, and these old airplane seat belts that, the kind with the buckle that would go around each. And the kid was overweight. He was in the mechanical restraint. He was sweating. I already knew he had some heart challenges. I couldn't believe he was in it. I came in, I put a fan on him, and I gave him a glass of water, and then I got written up for. I guess it's not a laughing matter, but I got written up for breaking the behavior protocol. To me, that's just a human rights issue. So from that moment on, 12 years ago, is when I decided that I had this really, really laser-focused mission on keeping kids in less restrictive settings. To me, it's a passion. It's not just a job. So for 12 years, so we have a couple hundred consultants in 50 or so school districts, and that's our goal. And it's a goal for a couple reasons. It's the law, right, the LRE, and it's also clinically appropriate for kids to be in less restrictive settings. And it's also, there's only so much money that can keep going out to private schools. And to give you an example of that is $600 million goes out, and this is from data from 2 years ago. It might be higher now. $600 million goes out to private schools each year. I think up north here, we work from Bergen down to Cape May County. Down in Cape May County, it's a lot cheaper, and the tuition may be around $57,000. But here, I think it's upwards of over $100. If you count transportation, it could be another 15 or 20, right? 40 grand sometimes, right? Again, I just want to illustrate a couple of the examples of why it's such a mission for me personally, and for a lot of you in the roles that you're in. And I know you feel my pain about some of the people coming in to pick at one little thing and then determine that that kid needs to be in a program that costs $150,000 in a restrictive setting that's not even good for them. And then later they come back to you and say, why did you allow that? The things I've seen over 26 years, there's patterns of this happening, and I want to share with you all the mistakes I made as well as the best practices that the research supports. I worked with a kid with a 3-hour round-trip bus ride, okay? The child never had a functional behavior assessment or a behavior plan in a program. The parents demanded that he goes out of district. They demanded a certain place because an independent evaluator, I think, was unethical, came in and recommended her own program. That's the kind of thing that as a board certified behavior analyst, that's the kind of thing I'm happy to report as an ethics violation to the board. I didn't do it in that particular case, but we should have. So it sounds like a conflict of interest. Plus, the individual went out, and it wasn't a good situation. Let me tell you about the 3-hour bus ride. Self-injury at least 100 times per trip. So it's a 3-hour. An hour and a half there, I believe an hour and a half back. Self-injury so severe that when I walked into the bus, I saw pillows all over the windows of the bus and duct tape and blood all over the pillows. And that's what kind of severe self-injury we're talking about. Did all kinds of functional behavior assessments and tried to determine, okay, let's find out why he's banging his head. Is it because he wants access to this tangible stimuli? Is it because he wants to escape something? Is it that he wants attention? Turned out to be none of those things. Turned out it was the freaking 3-hour bus ride that did it, because, sorry for my French, but he ended up, the treatment was, they took him on a 15-minute bus ride, and he had a threshold where he would have no behavioral problems or self-injury within 30 minutes. So we tested out, bringing him to a temporary program that was close by, no self-injury. Something happened after 30 minutes where we just couldn't control it, and the FDA didn't do anything. But so just an illustration of where the parent wanted it, okay? It was inappropriate. The child suffered from it. It probably cost $150,000 plus 40 grand in transportation, and it was horrible, and it was unethical that the independent evaluator recommended their own program. Raise your hand if you feel for me. Okay, good. I'm not the only one who sees these kinds of things. All right? So, many of you may be aware of last year the U.S. District Court settlement with New Jersey Department of Education. Over 50 or so school districts were considered in violation of LRE. You know, it's difficult because a lot of that is driven by attorneys, and like I said, they can draw targets around the arrow. Within that, New Jersey DOE had to pay, you know, $250,000 or so to the Education Law Center. That was just, we're thinking about dollars and cents. That was simply the attorney's fees, but then millions of dollars went out in other attorney's fees to be able to create these checklists. Has anyone ever seen the checklist for LRE? There's these monitoring checklists, and we're expected to adhere to those, and New Jersey DOE is supposed to come in and do monitoring. So I wanted to kind of just touch on that a little bit. This is an example of the checklist. Just one thing on the checklist would say, to the maximum appropriate, the child's educated where kids are not disabled. There are times when kids really should not be around other kids that are typically developing. And you all know those situations, and there are kids that need private placements. And that's a different story, but I find the majority of the time there's a lot of reasons that they're sent out of district, and it's not in the best interest. There's an overwhelming increasing trend. These data stopped in 2004, but there's an overwhelming increasing trend in the, it's even higher now. And the dark blue line here is the number of teachers' aides, and they're skyrocketing. I don't know how often you see this, but whoa, I got a little off track. I don't know how often you see this, but I worked in it, and I consulted in a school in Burlington Township that had 6 aides and 4 kids. So one was a teacher, 5 were aides. I have no idea why one had a 2-on-1. The presence of the teacher's aides were exacerbating the behaviors of the kids, because there were certain things they did that were for attention, and the fact that they had someone hovering over them, giving them attention for every one of those, it just exacerbated it. Have you ever seen situations where there's just too many aides in a classroom? Okay. Number one, it's expensive. Number two, it's not LRE, correct? It's not least restrictive to have people hover over you. And I don't want to come off rude on this, but sometimes it's the retired lunch lady that is thrown into this situation without training, correct? And it's not anyone's fault, but that's what they're the cards we may be dealt with. Or the bus aide who's turned into a parrot. What are some of the reasons? Do you see this sometimes? I don't have an answer to this, but I have some strategies in the top 6 ways to keep kids in LRE. But sometimes building administration doesn't always gel or have the same objectives. This is a touchy subject, but by a show of hands, do you see sometimes different objectives between the CST and the building administration? Okay, about 2/3 of you raise your hand. And some building administrations work really well with the CST, and others clash. Sometimes it's just a matter of communication, right? We find ourselves constantly being brokers between the two to pull them together and then make the decision in the right interest. Because if you think about it, the building administration is often held to employee morale, orderly conduct that's uniform, right, in the school. The principal is usually the go-to person that controls the school, and they want to prevent turnover, right? The child study team's objectives, they all have an LRE and FAPE objective. However, it's a little more prominent for the child study team. You guys are the ones that often are in front of the parents in the angry IEP meeting with the attorney or the advocate, saying that the program is too cookie cutter, it's not individualized, right? So as child study team members and directors of special education, we're often held to this standard to make sure it's very customized and individual. So often we have that as a challenge to overcome. So we spend, my assistant looked at this the other day, 16,000 hours in a year in trying to do three things. Decreasing ineffective staff that may be ineffective for the reasons we spoke about. Bringing kids back to district that shouldn't be in district because of the parent that wanted it and it wasn't appropriate. And then preventing kids from going out of district. And I wanted to say we have some clinical folks in the room, and some of you are school psychologists by trade. All of you have strong education backgrounds. I heard your where you work and what you do. But so some of this isn't going to be a surprise to you, but what I've found over 26 years, there's one clinical aspect that is often responsible for kids going out of district and behaviors becoming out of control. And it's stuff you probably already know, but I just want to highlight it. It's the extinction burst, okay? Yeah, I see a lot of you nodding your heads, so you know what I mean by the extinction burst. Whenever a behavior plan initially is implemented, at the outset of the plan, when the individual no longer receives reinforcement, whether it was negative attention or whatever it is that was put on extinction and ignored, the behaviors come back at a very rapid rate before they drop off. So the natural evolution and beginning of creating a behavior plan to keep a kid within district is for those behaviors to shoot up. And let me explain where the biggest challenge is. That at the height of the extinction burst is when it often gets to be too difficult for the para or for the aide. So what I wanted to talk about today is when we are going to implement a new behavior plan to keep the kid in LRE, we temporarily have to load up on resources just for the very beginning stage, and then the goal is to fade out quickly. It might just be a day, that first day of the implementation of the program.
I don't mean to jump in.
That's fine.
We're on a roll. I don't want to, but I don't. I can just say from my perspective, my issue isn't really the aid. It's when we get to that extinction burst. My issue is the classroom teacher. That's where I seem to have the most difficulty. They just want the kid out. They don't care how you do it. Just get them out of the room.
So yeah, I think you're right. Show of hands. How many people see?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. They do set them up.
Yeah.
And
So
or the building principal at that point says,
Oh, yeah.
okay, we're done, gone.
it's almost
Hopefully
like
it was gonna get better.
it's almost like they had a secret pact in advance to make it fail. Raise your hand if sometimes you think.
But you know what?
I'm with you, my man.
But they know the words to use. I feel unsafe.
Yeah.
I
Right.
feel
I have to protect
unsupported.
my
I have to
I might have a
protect
workers'
my
comp claim.
children.
I can't teach the other kids in the room because his behavior
Yeah.
is so.
Some even find a way of accidentally riling up other parents.
It starts with the ed specialists and then it moves to the parents.
I don't mean to get you fired up, but these,
That's true.
when I say you feel my pain, because
Yes.
you're the one that's in the line of fire with me. Because like I said, we're constantly in that situation defending districts as expert witnesses. I'm going to go over some case law today, because a lot of the stuff, when it comes down to it, is simply the IDEA code and the New Jersey code is loose in some areas about what's considered restrictive, what's considered good behavior programming, when is a functional behavior assessment really needed, and what happens when it's loose. It all goes back to previous administrative law judge decisions, right? So what I did, we have a full-time education attorney on staff who's a BCBA. I believe he's the only one in the world that's an attorney and a BCBA. Tony DeCesar, it is very interesting. Tony and I went through case law, just curated through, years and years of case law. Some of them we were in, like in 2007, and found that a good portion of the kids that went out of district for that 150,000 a year, it was because there wasn't a functional behavior assessment and some attempt at a behavior plan, let alone when you do implement the plan, some people already have the mindset that it's going to fail or wanting it to fail because they know that let's think about it from a sympathetic standpoint. They're going to get paid the same amount, right? Whether the kid's very difficult or not. So some people that don't have the best interest, they come to school and they want their job to be easier. So what we found is that you're right, the teacher and the aide, I should have said. It's a matter of sometimes loading the resources just for a day or two in the beginning stages of the plan, deploying some people in there, and actually, we go in and we model it, hand over hand. We take the hits. We show that it's effective, and there's no excuses. When you can show behavior change and demonstrate it, roll up your shirt sleeves and create the behavior change and ride out the burst, bottom line, you know it works, therefore you have data to support it, then it just becomes a performance issue, right? But we're getting into a lot. There's unions. I know how complicated it is for everyone. So there's one thing that will also help the extinction burst. It's strengthening alternative responses, and I know you know what I mean. One thing that can attenuate the extinction burst is providing these alternative behaviors. And one of the biggest issues is that when they start the extinction program or remove the source of reinforcement that was reinforcing the problem behavior in the beginning, there's not enough of a focus on strengthening the alternative replacement behavior. Okay, let me just, I want to get a little bit philosophical for a moment with you, and my ex-wife tells me I'm crazy like this. Maybe that's why her accent, I don't know. But she was a BCBA, so all you know, like she did. And I lost, because I got kicked out. So. All right. Anyway, I want to get philosophical for a second. I want you to think about the extinction burst. Believe it or not, and B.F. Skinner's works will indicate this, it's similar to Darwin's evolutionary theory. The extinction bursts are innate. They're innate within us. They're phylogenetic, and there's something it's something in our DNA that's passed along. And I'll give you an example why. This is kind of a weird picture, but if I was on this island, right, and every morning it would be wonderful, wouldn't it? If you're on the island, and I woke up every morning and I walked around the island, and I shook this coconut tree, and a coconut fell, and I ate it. And I went back to my little hovel and went to sleep, and I did that. That would be wonderful. But if I did that every day, and on day number 364, I walked around the island and I shook the tree and there was no coconut. Nothing fell out, right? All of a sudden, lack of reinforcement, right? Extinction burst time. It's within our DNA and within our bloodline. Our genes are passed on. The genes that are passed on through our bloodline that are strengthened are to have an extinction burst. So at that point in time, when I shake the coconut tree and nothing comes out, my next strategy is to probably kick the tree. It's to climb up the tree. It's probably to hang on a branch, and nothing comes out. My next thing would be to forage around the island to find coconuts. The thing I wouldn't do is just lay down and die. So I just wanted to, I know it sounds weird that I'm getting philosophical like this, but the extinction burst, not getting what we want, is within our DNA, and it's something we have to expect. And we're going to have to gear up for it and really be ready for that as soon as we start the implementation of a behavior plan. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So those that have the bloodline that pass on because they're strong or because they survived the absence of reinforcement and they were able to access it through variations of behavior. Also, another thing that happens during extinction burst is that we engage in unusual behaviors. Not just do we engage in more intense behavior, we engage in unusual ones. And we get what's called variance or extinction-induced variation in responding. You probably know what I'm talking about. So I'll give you an example. My daughter, I used to make this mistake. Again, this might be why I'm divorced, but when she was 2 years old, every time I'm preserving on that today, aren't I?
Extinction burst, we understand.
Yeah, let me get back to that. I'm going through a burst. I have a lot of pent up. All right, give you an example. The problem is for our teachers, it's so against the nurturing and the natural response to be able to ride out an extinction burst and ride it out and ignore it. It's against our nature. An example, 2 years old, my daughter is, I'm on the phone, I'm busy, I'm talking, she taps me on the leg, and my wife would yell at me all the time for this, and I'm like, wait, I'm teaching stuff on this, and I keep violating the principles, but she tapped me on the leg and said, excuse me, Daddy, and I keep talking because it didn't bother me, and then she tapped a little hard, excuse me, Daddy, and I just keep talking because it doesn't bother me. Then she might start kicking me, Daddy, screaming, and then pinching me, and then it got to, so the variation in responding escalated. It's called changes in topography, so the behavior emerges into other things until you get what you want. And then right when it's at the height of the burst, it's too much for me because I'm on the phone and it's disrupting my conversation. I'm like, Olivia, what do you want? And then I give her what she wants and she goes away. What did I just do wrong there? Yeah, I reinforced right at the height of the burst. This happens every day in school districts when they try to implement the behavior plan. Right in the beginning stages are the critical part. Now, the next time I'm on the phone with Olivia and she's doing that, if I try to start ignoring the inappropriate behavior, the next burst is higher. Does that make sense? So we create a monster and the extinction bursts get greater and greater and the intensity and the topographies change, and it's called a response class hierarchy. It gets more and more intense. So the best way to treat that behavior for my daughter would have been to notice right away. I mean, this isn't stuff you don't already know, but I just want to reinforce it. Is for my daughter to hear her say, "Excuse me, Daddy," and I'll say, "Oh, good job. Wait 1 second," and then I teach her to learn how to wait because she's not going to get my attention every moment, but I need to catch the appropriate request, learn her, maybe set a timer, just learn wait, and then catch her. Okay, so this my point of telling you is just within every teacher and every parent, it's against our nature when there's a burst or something to not want to appease and make the burst go away. Make sense? So what we do day to day in the schools, what we're expecting teachers to do is the direct opposite of their instinct, especially when the retired lunch lady or aide that was the bus aide, all they know is their parenting skills. Make sense? So we're creating the
We
situation.
also hear from the teacher that, well, all the other students see what they're doing and that I'm not addressing the behavior, and then they're going to wonder why he gets away with doing that, but the other kids don't or they can. So,
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Yeah, that's a common thing, and we'll talk about that. That why is this student allowed to do this? And we usually have individual discussions, depending on the functioning level of the kid, that this is temporary and it's only for now. Everyone's different, and this is temporary because it really should be temporary. That's the other thing about applied behavior analysis. There's a constant misunderstanding that it's about dangling a carrot and an artificial reward. And teachers, raise your hand if you've heard folks, teachers or parents or teachers' aides say to you, "I'm not going to reinforce that behavior. I'm not going to reinforce that kid for doing something he should be doing anyway." Do you hear that all the time? The area, what we do is we'll gather all the aides and teachers in the first year of this and just try to drive home one point about the fact that reinforcers initially have to be artificial. And we give a lot of examples. We just want to get the buy-in from the aides that you're going to have an extinction burst, be ready for it, and reinforcers in the beginning are going to be artificial, but and I always give the aides an example. I explain what I'll ask them, raise your hand if you read for pleasure or have a Kindle or something, and they raise their hand. Then I ask them, do you remember when you were in first grade, kindergarten, you were given artificial points and praise and stickers and different artificial rewards, parent attention to get grades, and somewhere along the way that was gradually thinned out and faded out. Now you read for the sake of the leisure of reading, right? That's the idea of applied behavior analysis. And sometimes when I explain that, I'm like, look, right now we're using this artificial toy or praise or ridiculous candy or whatever it is that's artificial. But the goal is to thin that out. And too long, what happens is that the behavior plan drags on and it's never thinned out into something appropriate. Because in the end, our goal is for the child, like for you to read the book because you enjoy reading, the natural rewards take over. Getting a job, even if it's with a job coach, making friends, right? They're all the natural rewards and the artificial ones. So I hear that all the time, and we, in the very beginning of a school year, try to set the tone. You'd be amazed how it sets the tone of the school by just getting the buy-in in the very beginning about the extinction burst and that there's 4 reasons for behavior problems, and we start to get into the 4 functions. And it's amazing that if the teachers can understand it's not personal, that there's 4 universal reasons, there's 4 functions for why they behave the way they do. And a lot of you may know those 4 reasons: attention, escape from something unpleasant, access to tangible stimuli such as Game Boys or Xboxes, and then internal reasons or automatic reinforcement. And what we do in the beginning of the year is we explain, it's usually a big auditorium of them. We have these gift cards and they interact so they're all watching, but they have to understand that it's not personal and that every single behavior is maintained by one of those 4 things. So just because that kid's on the ground laughing at you, running, And it's not personal, it's that reaction. And once the teachers get an understanding that it's for 4 reasons, but what I love about applied behavior analysis is that it's universal and it's lawful, it's systematic, and it's methodical. So it's like engineering. I believe at one point, and I remember B.F. Skinner's works, they feel that behavior analysis at one point will be considered a natural science. It's so just like physics, gravity, chemistry is very lawful. When this is the trigger, this happens. When this follows it, it increases or decreases it. It's like behavioral engineering, and if they could pull the personal part out of it and learn to just to respond and reinforce, ignore and reinforce, and do the opposite of what your instinct is usually the key, right? So, method number 1. Sorry, I got really into a tangent. How much time do we have for that? I don't have that much work. Because there's nothing worth, I find that the other thing is board certified behavior analysts suck when it comes to presenting, and they go very long. So it's like being stupid and arrogant. So I want to make it clear. So I want to make this a very concise presentation. I want to show you the 6 points and be done. and not be arrogant. Crisis training, number 1. Let me just ask you though, how many of you, by show of hands, does your district do crisis training for everyone on the front line? Show of hands.
We're working on it.
We will be
Working on it.
You know,
Okay.
it's a staffing issue. If you want to take people out and train, it's a sub-issue, then, because then you're leaving classrooms with the most vulnerable population, with substitutes, and then nobody wants to come back to work.
Yeah.
It's more a management way to find a way to
It's
do it.
a practical issue with being able to deliver it when people don't want to work 1 extra hour past their time and pulling them out of the schedule. Okay, what we do is for some large school districts, we can only have 1 trainer for every eight learners because they have to break up and pair and try things. So they fill up auditoriums, and we have about 15 trainers, 1 on every 8, and they're practicing it in the gym, and on their program development day, they all get certified. So within 6 hours, they get safe and positive approaches. There's different models. I'm not saying any one's better than another, but I can't stress to you the importance of the crisis training for many reasons. One, how often do you see this? A student flops to the ground. Their arm is, the teacher, all they know is to prompt by the arm, because, or they can sit and wait it out, or they can move them into a safer situation. Sometimes they have to move them, and they're not given the techniques. And then when you pull a student like that, what happens? Boom, dislocated shoulder. I've seen it a lot. And I've seen parents have civil lawsuits as a result of it. I don't want to get into all that, but let me get back to the crisis training part. It's not just about restraint. You don't even have to get into the restraint aspect of crisis training. If the paras and the teachers can just learn, you can keep your kids in district if you teach the basic safety assist and safety escorts. It might just be moving a child appropriately from here to here as a last resort. Now, we're not saying that using physical prompting is the way we're going to teach the child by forcing physical prompts, but it's a way we're going to make the situation safe.